Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are checking out yet another Collecta 2023 release, and this time we've got ourselves another aquatic species as we are checking out the Shastasaurus. And this is definitely another brand new species to enter my collection, as I do not have a Shastasaurus in my collection currently, so Collecta giving me now 5 potentially new species to enter into my collection for the 2023 year. And this one's really cool because it obviously sports a very orca-like paint scheme, which I think looks very flashy and quite nice on the model overall. And it is our second marine reptile for this year from Collecta. It's actually the only other marine reptile because the first was the Mosasaurus. So that as well is pretty fun. I wish we would have got some like prehistoric mammals or something along those lines for this year, but maybe next year. Hopefully Collecta will produce some of those for next year, but it is nice to get, a few different aquatic species again this year. So let's go ahead and get a closer look at this really nice looking Shastasaurus. So starting up here at the head sculpt of the Shastasaurus, you can definitely see some really nice looking skin texture. Like, it absolutely has some beautiful looking skin texture throughout. And you can also see the nostrils are nicely sculpted as well. We have some kind of like imperfections in the skin and stuff. You can see that right there. So straight away we've got some nice doses of realism to the figure. You can also see the eye is painted with a nice glossy black, and I love that they have this nice white stripe run up circle around the eye, obviously again giving it that orca-like look when it comes to the black and white appearance overall. Again, nice looking texturing up here on the top of the head. As you lead down here to the underside, you can see the black continues to run along the lower jaw here before transitioning to that white there for the underside. And then we also have an open mouth for the Shastasaurus. There's a nicely sculpted tongue in there, also a nice purplish tone. There you can get a good idea of what the detailing looks like there on the inside of the upper side of the mouth. Very nice, actually, slight glossy look it looks like in there to that. Like, it definitely looks like they used a glossy purplish paint or a satin purplish paint for the inside of the mouth. I haven't noticed many gloss coats on the insides of the mouths of the new figures from Collecta, but this one definitely has a slightly shiny look to it. As you continue to move back, you can see the ear right there and some nice creasing in the skin throughout. And one thing you'll notice about this one that kind of jumps out at you straight away is the fact that it sort of is like covered in barnacles, or at least that's what I'd assume they are. Now, this isn't that big of a model. You can see it's a little on the smaller side, not, small by any means, but if you compare it to the Mosasaurus that we reviewed recently, it's definitely on the smaller side. So the fact that it is a little smaller, if we get nice and close, you can see the barnacles are present. They're obviously painted out in a way where you can tell that that's what they're meant to be, but they're not like sculpted in a way where you can really see the detail of the barnacles very nicely. If my camera would stay focused, you can see it's more like little kind of bumps on the skin. But again, that can easily be forgiven because of the fact that the model's not that huge, and actually sculpting out fine detail like that I think would have been a little bit tough on something so small. You can again see some creasing down here in the throat, and we also just generally have some bumps to the skin here as you move along. Every once in a while you can kind of see it a little bit, but you can also again take notice to the fact that, like I said, this thing is covered in barnacles. You can see them all over the underside of the flipper, and they continue to run down the course of the underside of the animal, more here on the underside of that flipper, and even as we lead up, you've got one right here, and then as you lead down, you have more here on the upper side of the flipper as well. You can also see that the actual texturing to the skin looks quite nice on the flipper, and you kind of see like imperfections a little bit as you move along the outer edge of that flipper, again adding in some nice realism to the figure as a whole. I'm never a huge fan of when you see models sculpted out so perfectly where it's just like almost like a drawing of an animal more so than an actual real animal, where it's just like absolutely picture perfectly shaped, whereas Collecta likes to add a lot of realism to their figures and models. As you continue to move along, you can see a ton of really nice fine detail when it comes to the actual texturing of the skin. Like, there is just mountains of detail when it comes to the fine detail as you run through the course of the Shastasaurus. You can see a little bit of like a jagged sort of a design as you move along here when it comes to the transition between the black and white. It's not a smooth transition down, it's a very abrupt transition, and obviously it's made that way for a reason, to give it sort of that, again, almost orca-like look. You can see more of the barnacles as we move down through the course of the stomach here, of our Shastasaurus. And as you continue to move down, you again see that the nice looking detail is very, very vibrant throughout the course of the model. And also on the underside specifically, the entire underside has a bit of a glossy, almost wet look to it. The white that they used definitely was a satin variation of white, and you can really see that the underside shines very nicely. I actually wouldn't have minded had they done that with the upper side as well, because it really would have created that nice wet look. You can see more barnacles here on the underside of that flipper, and we do have a couple over here on that side. And then if you take a look up here at the top, you again can kind of see the spinal column here running down the course of the back. A few more barnacles on this flipper as well. Yep, absolutely same deal over here. I like that you don't see very many here on the majority of the body, except for, there it is, just this one over here. But then as you continue to move out the course of the tail, you see more really nice looking texture, as well as a nice curve to the tail, obviously showing the swimming movement of our Shastasaurus. And I like that we had that little slit right there, so adding in kind of like a little injury and stuff right there. Nice creasing in the tail fin as well there. Another little slight injury there to the underside of the Shastasaurus. You're not really going to see too much difference, I think, on the opposing side. Oh, actually, we do have another one up there on the body. You can see one right there as far as those barnacles go. But the opposing side is going to look primarily the same overall, because the animal isn't in any type of a drastic different position, because it's mostly just swimming straight forward. If you actually take a look here from up above, you can see the majority of the body has almost a straightforward sort of an appearance to it, with the nice curve here in the tail. So just like the Mosasaurus, the majority of the movement is shown in the tail, and obviously that's swimming motion, so we know our Shastasaurus is kind of swimming straight forward rather than making any kind of like a dramatic turn or anything. And I like that. I definitely think it's a nice looking pose overall for the Shastasaurus. It's not anything overly flashy. It's not anything overly, complicated. It's definitely just a nice naturalistic pose overall. And I really do like the figure. Again, the pose is nice, the sculpt is nice, and I like the paint job as well. Again, I like the fact that they kind of went the style of like an orca with the paint job, because again, it absolutely could be the type of coloration of this animal. You've got that darker upper side, the lighter underside, exactly what you would usually see on marine animals. So definitely a nicely done figure overall. I would say I like the Mosasaurus a little bit better, but this is still a really nice looking version of a Shastasaurus, and I'm just generally excited to now have one to add to my collection. Now, as far as the size goes, again, I did state that it's not all that huge. Definitely nowhere near as huge as the Mosasaurus. You are looking at about, from the snout there to the tail, about 10¼ inches, or a little over 26 centimeters. And that's really about it that we're going to get for a measurement, especially now that it's up here on these little plastic stands so that we can see it a little better. You're not going to get much of a height, except for the obviously cheating height of those stands holding it up. But for a size comparison, here are our usual review comparison suspects, as we have Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Dilophosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line, next to our Shastasaurus. And you can see pretty much exactly what I was saying. It's not huge, but it also does still have a pretty nice size. I would say it's a decent medium-sized figure, especially when it comes to Collecta marine reptiles. Like, a lot of them end up being, except for obviously the huge deluxe ones, but a lot of them end up being pretty small. And to show you that, we're probably going to have to take him off of the little plastic stands here to give you a better look at the actual size down lower on the ground. But for another comparison, we'll bring in a few of the comparisons that we did with the Mosasaurus, as we have the Liapleurodon here next to the Shastasaurus, and you can definitely see that the Shastasaurus wins as far as the size goes. For another comparison, we also have the very small Dolichorhynchops here next to the Shastasaurus, again showing you that the Shastasaurus is also quite a bit larger. Then we have the gorgeous Elasmosaurus from Collecta here, yet again next to the Shastasaurus. This one, a little closer in size, I would say. If we actually put them next to each other, probably going to have a pretty similar size. Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely see lengthwise they are very similar. So if you have the Elasmosaurus, you'll have a pretty good idea as far as the length of the Shastasaurus. And then for a few random dinosaur comparisons as far as Collecta models go, we have the Borealopelta here next to the Shastasaurus, again showing you that it's not a huge figure, definitely a good medium-sized. We also have one of my all-time favorites from Collecta, the Ulleratitan here next to the Shastasaurus. And again, we are kind of bringing in some of the smaller Age of Dinosaurs figures, because you don't really want to bring in the deluxe ones. We know that it's going to be a good bit smaller than the deluxe figures. But for another comparison, There is the Mosasaurus for 2023 next to our Shastasaurus, and you can clearly see a pretty significant size difference between these two. So, obviously the Shastasaurus is a bit smaller, but it still is pretty decently sized in comparison to that Mosasaurus, because the Mosasaurus is huge, so it is nice to see that the Shastasaurus is still quite sizable next to it. Then we have the Collecta Deluxe Dimetrodon, and yes, I know I said I wasn't going to bring in many deluxe figures. I just love this figure, so I felt like it would be a fun one to bring in for a comparison, and plus it's one of the more popular Collecta figures, I would believe, so definitely a good one for a comparison. And the final comparison is another really popular one from Collecta, as we have the Age of Dinosaurs version of the Dino-Kyrus here, next to our Shastasaurus, just to iron out one last comparison. So this brand new 2023 Shastasaurus from Collecta is definitely another really nice figure, and honestly, they haven't had a figure that I would even remotely say is close to bad this entire year. Actually, every figure honestly has been excellent so far, and we only have, I think, like maybe 2 left, I believe. No, 3 potentially. Around 3 figures left to take a look at, so I think the odds are in their favor as far as having a stellar 2023 lineup. And this one is a really nice one, again, just because it's a new species that I don't have in my collection, and I would imagine many people probably don't have in their collection. So as always, Collecta supplying us with more obscure species, helping us to acquire species that we otherwise wouldn't usually have in our collections, and this one is definitely a really good one to add. And on top of that, they've done such a great job on it as a whole. The sculpt is really highly detailed, again, very, very nicely done, and similar to the Mosasaurus, where I feel like, you know, being someone that paints models and stuff, like, and I don't paint marine reptiles like ever. I don't know if I ever have, actually. I think I painted a Mosasaurus once, potentially. But I always have that kind of, like, want and need to apply, like, washes or dry brushing or something to just sort of highlight the detail. But this is another instance where we've got a marine reptile. It doesn't really need that. We don't need to try to make it look a little bit dirty. You know, it's going to be living in the water. It would have that nice, pretty, clean look to it like it actually does here. So great job as far as that goes. And I love the fact that they've added those barnacles all over the entire figure, like really adding another level of realism to the model and just giving it something that differentiates it from all of the other models out there. So that is a plus. Not that there's a lot of Shastasaurus, but all the other marine reptiles that Collecta has released. They do have some that have barnacles and stuff on them as well, but it's nice to see them continue to do that, and again, just in general with the Shastasaurus, give it a nice dose of realism. I also like the fact that they've given it that kind of orca-like paint scheme. I think it looks really good on the figure. Definitely works nicely and looks natural on the animal overall, so very nice choice as far as that goes. And again, being that it's not a huge figure, it's a nice kind of medium-sized figure. It's a convenient size, so it should have no problem fitting into pretty much everyone's collections. So if you are interested in this, just like with all the others, make sure you follow Everything Dinosaur. Make sure you stay up to date on whatever they are stocking and follow them on all of their social media accounts. Make sure you also follow Collecta as well, so you can always stay up to date on everything that they are releasing. And make sure you pick this up when it does officially arrive on Everything Dinosaur. And also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.